The Everlasting Now, Chapter 3. A wisteria vine twined around the columns and roofline of the front porch. The silky purple flowers, like clusters of grapes, covered peeling paint, broken roof shingles, and rain-damaged eaves. Shirley Bolagi lay stretched out in the vine's leafy shade. Swan and I were waiting for the train. "I wish we were rich," said Swan. "Then I could have lots of dresses and a Shirley Temple doll with real hair." "That's just plain silly," I told her, scratching the cat's belly with my toe. Off in the distance, the train whistle wailed over the empty fields. The men would be here soon. It wasn't long till our boarders came up from the front path. Mr. E. L. Edwards, the engineer, and Dusty Rhodes, his fireman, wore hickory-striped overalls and railroad caps. Captain Wooten was dressed in a dark blue suit. He carried a tin lunch pail with "Conductor" stenciled on the top, a sheaf of newspapers under his arm, and a little bag that I knew held presents for Swan. He was always bringing her stuff from the dining car, menus, pink and green mints shaped like tiny hearts, and fancy napkins. I learned a lot about railroading since the men from the Southern Railroad started boarding with us. For instance, now I know that railroad men like to be called by their initials. Only Dusty was called by his name. He said a man whose last name was Rhodes was bound to be given the nickname of Dusty, Muddy, or Crooked. "I picked the best one," he said. Dusty was skinny with curly red hair that he tried to tame with Brill Cream hair tonic. His job as a fireman is hard. He sits on the left side of the engine's cab, pivoting in a crouch while he shovels coal, black diamonds, between the tender and the fire, and he has to scatter the coals so the fire burns evenly. "They don't come any better than Dusty," said Mr. Edwards. "He can place his shots in the firebox good as Babe Ruth hits baseballs." Before I met Dusty, I didn't know what a firebox was. I've been watching steam locomotives for as long as I can remember, but I never thought about how the steam got there, so I asked. "It's the firebox that holds the fire that heats the water that makes the steam that runs the engine," Dusty explained. "The engineer pushes the throttle and controls the flow of steam down the main steam pipe to the engine. That's what moves the steam locomotive along the tracks and across the country." Dusty knows a lot about mechanical things. He's also the only person who can keep our car, an old 1925 Maxwell, in running condition. I like him a lot. Captain Wooten, too, but it's Mr. Edwards who's my hero. When he walks into a room, it seems to fill up with something good and strong. Swan led the way into the hall. At the foot of the stairs, Mr. Edwards took out his pocket watch, a round gold belova that he calls Jubilo. Opening it, he looked at the face and said, "We were right on time." Folks around here set their watches by the train. Mr. Edwards said that's why he named his watch Jubilo. It sends a message. It announces time. An engineer's watch is very important. It signals to him to make up time or hold time back. It tells him if the train's running fast or slow. "The way I look at it, as a railroad engineer carries time in his pocket," said Mr. Edwards, handing me the watch. "Now, how about taking Jubilo up to my room?" "I'll go tell your mama we're here." Holding the watch and chain carefully, I went upstairs. In the light from the window, Jubilo shone like a small sun in the palm of my hand. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a railroad engineer. I want to carry time in my pocket, too." Mealtimes of the boarders are like big family dinners. At least I think they are. Our family's pretty small, but I can imagine big families having dinners like ours. Mama puts a starched white tablecloth and fresh flowers on the dining room table. She and Lily cook different kinds of stuff, too, so everybody's happy. Our meals are better because of having company. After the blessing, Dusty tucked his napkin in his shirt front, spooned up candied yams, and passed the bowl down the table. "Did I tell you all about my visit to the picture show?" "Not more than twice," said Captain Wooten. He's not really a captain, but he's called that because of the respect the train passengers have for him. "Tell it anyway," said Swan, tracing her finger down the pitcher of iced tea that was beaded in the heat. "I had a turnaround in Savannah, and some time to kill," said Dusty, "so I went downtown to the Lucas Theater. It's a ritzy place, marble stairs, crystal lights hanging down, and velvet ropes across the doors." "How'd you get in?" Swan asked, eating black-eyed peas one at a time. "The usher took down the rope, sweetheart. While we were waiting for the picture to start, a fella playing a fancy organ come right up out on the floor. Then the lights died down, and a pathy newsreel started up." He took a swallow of tea and continued his story. "Old Adolf Hitler was up on stage in front of thousands of folks, sticking their arms up in the air to salute. The soldiers marched by all stiff-legged, goose-stepping, is what they call it. Now what kind of way is that to march? If you ask me, Germans don't show good sense. Why, Hitler's such a liar, he'd have to hire someone to call his dog for him. I saw Hitler in a newsreel too, I said. He's goofy looking. He's a dangerous man, said Mr. Edwards. All Nazis are dangerous. The way he said it, I got a cold chill down my back. For a minute or so, nobody said anything. Then Lily brought in biscuits fresh out of the oven. We'll have to take up the problem with the Nazis later, said Captain Wooten. Dusty will be too busy chewing to talk. His appetite for Lily's biscuits was famous. After supper, the men went out to the front porch. When I finished my chores, I went out to join them. Katydids whirred in the fields with a metallic sound that nearly drowned out the slow creaking of rocking chairs. A light breeze freshened as the sun sank lower in the sky. Dusty was sitting on the steps talking about something that happened down at the railroad yard. I wasn't there when it happened, he said, making room for me on the step, but I trust P.B. Dixon to tell me the truth. Who's P.B. Dixon? I asked. He's a Pullman porter on the railroad, said Dusty, and a good man. Colored porters work the sleeping cars, you know, and Dixon heard the story over at the colored boarding house where he stays when he's in town. Brother, said Mr. Edwards softly, keep in mind we're talking railroad business, and you know you aren't to say anything about what we talk about. It could get someone in trouble. You understand? Yes, sir, I said. As I was saying, Dusty continued, the sheriff's got no authority down in the yard. He's overstepping himself, beating up hobos. It's the business of the railroad bulls to deal with hobos and tramps. You don't need to beat 'em up. Was the man who was beaten white or colored? Captain Wooten asked. Colored, said Dusty. I don't believe it would make any difference to him, long as he could beat up somebody. But he can get away with beating a colored man easier. A few minutes later, I heard Mama and Swan coming down the hall. The men grew quiet. Mr. Edwards filled his pipe and looked out across the garden. The tobacco smoke smelled like cherries as it drifted over the railings. When Mama and Swan were seated, Mr. Edwards began talking about driving the train and some of the things that happened. There's music in the rails, he said in a deep voice. You are beguiled by sounds and smells. You can hear a chorus of frogs in the ditches at blind sidings, and there's the smell of steam mixed with fresh plowed earth. Best of all is the wonder of a 440 locomotive racing down the high iron with a mail contract at stake. That's when you hear the music of the rails. Taking a puff of his pipe, he said, When you come right down to it, railroading's a fine life. Mr. Edwards, I said, do you think I can be a railroad man when I grow up? I expect so, he said. I don't know, said Dusty. How's your pitching arm? I couldn't tell if he was kidding or not. Not too good, I said. Then I guess you won't be a fireman, he said. It felt so good out there on the porch. I felt safe when the men were here. And I know one thing. I'm making a promise to myself that one day that fine life will be mine. I'm going to race down the high iron and listen to the music of the rails. The sun slipped lower in the western sky, and the air cooled. Chimney swifts soared and darted just above the treetops. The men's voices wove a net of words that held us captive as the long day faded. When the first star pricked the sky, Swan made a wish. Then we sat out on the porch, rocking the sundown. Chapter 4. Morning mist ghosted the tracks, and a plume of coal-smelling black smoke rose from the train's engine. Mr. Dupree, the station master, gave the signal, and engine number 111 carried 6 freight cars, a mail and baggage car, and 1 passenger car, chugged down the tracks. I watched the train leave, then started back home. Down the road, sharecroppers' houses sat scattered across the fields like pulled teeth. Sammy Linton lives in one of them. He's in my class at school this year. That's about the only place I ever see him, and he doesn't always show up there. Sammy's little and skinny, and his hair looks like cotton. He comes to school barefooted, and sometimes he has to go to the school nurse because of his bruises. Miss Riley, the school principal, sent a note home with him asking to see his parents, but they didn't come. I don't even know if Sammy's got a mama. If he does, I never saw her. But he surely does have talent for making puppets. He carves them out of wood, and their faces look real. He brought some to school to show us. One day, he asked me if my mama had any scraps of material he could have to make clothes for his puppets. Mama fixed up a box for him with leftover material from stuff she'd sewn. Pajamas, a dress for Swan, pillowcases, and aprons. I took the box to school for him, but the next day Sammy brought it back. His pa told him the Lintons don't take charity from folks who think they're better than anybody else. I could tell Sammy felt bad about it. When I told Mama what Mr. Linton had said, she was real mad. I am better than he is, she said. The sorriest creature in the swamp is better. That old man's a drunk, and he's mean to his family. Brother, you remember to be kind to Sammy." "Yes, ma'am," I said. Nobody knew how long the Lintons would be in Snow Hill. Sharecroppers live in mean houses for a season, then leave for another mean house in another season. They'd probably move after the summer picking season was over. Even though it was early, the sun was already hot. Today was grass-cutting day, and I had to cut it. It wasn't easy on account of we've got a lot of it, and the lawnmower isn't worth a toot. It's an old push-mower that I believe Noah used before he built the ark. I dragged the confounded thing from the shed out back and got started, but the blades were so dull I had to stop to sharpen them. While I was trying to use the flat file, my sweaty hands and arms got crusted with rusty filings. I cut my finger and nearly filed off part of my thumb. A fly buzzed around my head, and when I tried to swat it, I hit my sore thumb on the lawnmower handle. "That's it," I said. "I quit." I went over to the spigot and splashed cold water over my face and head, then sat on the back steps to cool off. The sweet smell of blackberries cooking drifted through the screen door. I could hear Mama and Lily in the kitchen. They were making blackberry jelly and talking up a storm about somebody named Rose. "She's had a hard row to hoe," said Lily. "First, that trifling man of hers runs off and left her with a small boy to take care of, and she didn't even have a job." Then they started talking real soft, and I couldn't hear what they said even though I tried. I learned a lot by eavesdropping, although Mama said if you eavesdrop, you might hear something about yourself you won't like. I went inside and hung my hat in the doorknob. "We need a new lawnmower," I said. "That ain't all we need," said Lily. "What's the matter?" I asked, not knowing for sure something was. "Brother," said Mama, "you don't have to know every single thing that goes on." "I just asked," I said, taking the pitcher of ice water out of the icebox. "Rose is Lily's sister," said Mama. "Anyway," said Lily, "one day Rose saw an ad in the Negro paper saying things were better for coloreds in Detroit. She believed it up and left Snow Hill. She got a job all right, but now she lost it, and she's sending Champion to stay with Papa and me till she gets back on her feet again." "Who's Champion?" I asked. "Rose's son," said Mama, ladling purple jelly into pint jars. "So I don't know him either, right?" "No, I don't reckon you would," said Lily. "That was before I came to work here. About the time my daddy died." 2 years ago," I said. Mama looked over at me, her eyes shiny. "How old is he?" I asked. "Almost 12, same as you," said Lily, pouring hot paraffin over the top of the jelly to seal it in the jars. "Champion can be a big help on the farm," said Mama. "I have to believe it'll work out fine. They do say the Lord tempers the wind to the shorn lamb." "I pray that's so, Miss Serena," said Lily, wiping her eyes on her apron. Later, Mama explained it wasn't that Lily didn't want her nephew to come for a visit. She was just worried about being able to take care of him. "These days," Mama said, "keeping clothes on your back and food on the table are everyday troubles for most folks." Lily and her father, Jesse Luther, live in a farming community called Rabbit Yard. That's within good walking distance of our house. Jesse's a farmer and a preacher at the Free Hope Baptist Church. It was there that Lily and her sister Rose had sung with a gospel group called the Five Golden Stars. After Rose left town, the group renamed itself the Five Golden Stars -1. Jesse raises crops, chickens, and a few pigs. Most days he makes a regular stop by the local cafe for scraps to feed his pigs. But times are so hard that if hobos get there first, the pigs lose out and have to make do with a few table scraps, corn husks, and peelings. A few days later, I was standing under the chinaberry tree in the backyard. Sunlight shining through the leaves turned my skin green. Blue jays were setting up a fuss in the magnolia tree nearby, and I was going to run 'em off with my slingshot. I pulled back the sling, let her fly, and whack! It hit a boy I'd never laid eyes on before. Lily yelled, "Brother, what is wrong with you? You crazy or what? You just hit Champion in the head. Get over here." "It was a pure accident," I said. "I was aiming at the blue jay." "Well, your aim is off," she said. "This is my nephew, Champion Lucky. And Champion, this is the strange person who lives in this house. His name is James Longstreet, Sayer, and he's called Brother. Now, if you'll excuse us for a minute, Brother and I are going to have a little talk." Which meant she'd talk and I'd listen. If Lily told Mama what I did, she'd kill me, or let Lily do it. Lily took me off to a corner of the yard where she reminded me about the last time I got in trouble with my slingshot. I swear she has a memory like an elephant. Just when you figure she's forgotten, she'll remind you of your past sins. Last summer, a friend of Mama's was visiting from Selma with her son Dwayne. Dwayne was how they said it. He was 10 years old and the biggest creep I ever saw. He was sneaky, like one of those little slick dogs that come up behind and nip your ankles. I got him good. Of course I got in trouble, and Mama took away my slingshot for a while, but it was worth it. You didn't like him either, I said. His mama didn't spoil him rotten, said Lily. Besides, anybody named Dwayne is bound to spend serious time in a state prison, but then Champion ain't Dwayne. I'm sorry, Lily. I didn't mean to hit him. Go tell him he's the one that got hit in the head, she said. Now, hand it over. Aw, Lily, I spent a lot of time getting this slingshot just right. I'd rubbed the wood with sandpaper till it was smooth as powder. I made the sling out of a piece of old inner tube from the filling station. I handed over my perfect slingshot. How long you going to keep it? I asked. As long as it takes for you to get smart, she said. Champion was waiting on the porch. He was kind of dressed up. His white shirt was buttoned up to the top. His trousers were starched to a fare-thee-well, and he wore black high-top tennis shoes. His skin was lighter than Lily's. What'd you shoot at me with? He asked. Slingshot, I said. Well, a Chinaberry from a slingshot. I'm sorry, guess I zigged when I should have zagged. I didn't want to tell him that I couldn't always see what I was aiming at. Didn't hurt much, he said, rubbing his head. Swan came out with her cat draped over her arm. Mama's gonna be mad with you, brother, shooting at strangers. Lily told me. She smiled at Champion. My cat's name is Shirley Bolligy. I named her after Shirley Temple, my favorite movie star. Bolligy's the name of the town where my grandmother was born, only she's dead now. What's your whole name? Champion Always Lucky, he replied. Huh? It's almost as long as brothers. Won't you have a seat? He rocked from one foot to the other, then sat down. He looked all around at Mama's garden, at the tall pole hung with hollow gourds for purple martins to nest in, and at the post of the porch that needed painting. This is your home? It used to belong to our grandfather, I said, but he died. Now we live here. It's mighty big for just one family, he said. We got boarders, said Swan. They take up a lot of room. I'm going to be staying here over by my Aunt Lily's and my grandpa's. He's alive. I rode the Gray Dog all the way from Detroit by myself. I'd never heard the Greyhound bus called the Gray Dog before. I was impressed. It sounded tough. That's a ways to come all by yourself, I said. Well, I didn't mind it too much, he said.